A millionaire discovers that his pregnant ex-wife is working at the cafe in his hotel and finds her serving coffee to his current wife. He is completely shocked. The reaction he has in front of everyone will surprise you. If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to like this video and tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. The crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the grand ballroom of the Stellar Heights Hotel, where Silicon Valley's elite gathered for the annual Environmental Innovation Summit. Alexander Sterling, the hotel's billionaire owner, stood at the center of it all, his perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit a statement of success. At 45, he had everything he could desire: a thriving business empire, respect from his peers, and a beautiful wife who shared his vision for the future. Or so he thought until that moment. His world tilted on its axis when he spotted her across the room. Elena Martinez, his ex-wife, moved gracefully between tables, wearing a simple black uniform instead of the designer dresses she once favored. Her long dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her face, though tired, still held that quiet determination he remembered so well. But what made his breath catch wasn't just seeing her there. It was the unmistakable curve of her pregnant belly beneath the server's apron. Alexander's fingers tightened around his champagne glass as he watched Elena approach his table, where his current wife, Victoria, sat engrossed in conversation with other executives. Time seemed to slow as Elena leaned forward to pour coffee into Victoria's cup, her movements precise and professional. "Thank you," Victoria said without looking up, her perfectly manicured fingers tapping away at her tablet as she discussed their latest sustainable energy project. Elena's eyes briefly met Alexander's, and in that fraction of a second he saw a flash of something, pride perhaps or defiance, before she turned away, disappearing into the crowd of servers. The irony wasn't lost on him. This very hotel, a crown jewel in his hospitality empire, had been one of their shared dreams. They'd spent countless nights planning it together, envisioning a space that would combine luxury with environmental responsibility. Now she was serving coffee in the very establishment they'd dreamed up together. "Alex?" Victoria's voice cut through his thoughts. "The board members are waiting for your presentation on the new solar initiative." He nodded mechanically, but his mind was elsewhere. Memories flooded back. Elena's passionate speeches about community development, her innovative ideas for sustainable business practices, the way her eyes lit up when discussing social impact projects. How had she ended up here, serving the very people she once stood alongside? The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Alexander delivered his presentation on autopilot, his thoughts constantly drifting to Elena. He noticed how she moved efficiently through the crowd, her face a mask of professional detachment. Yet there was something else, something in the way she carried herself that spoke of untold stories. Later that night, in his penthouse office overlooking the city, Alexander sat in his leather chair, staring at the old photo he kept hidden in his desk drawer. It showed him and Elena at the groundbreaking ceremony for their first sustainable housing project. They were both smiling, covered in dirt, their hard hats slightly askew. That was before the empire, before the billions, before everything changed. He picked up his phone, scrolling through his contacts until he found James Morrison, his oldest friend and confidant. If anyone knew what had happened to Elena after the divorce, it would be James. The phone rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. "Alex, it's nearly midnight. I need to know what happened to Elena after everything." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Are you sure you want to go down this road?" Alexander looked out at the city lights twinkling below, each one representing a life, a story, a possibility. "I saw her today, James. She's working as a server in my hotel. She's pregnant. I need to understand how this happened." James sighed heavily. "It's not a pretty story, Alex. After her father passed, things got tough, really tough. She tried to keep her environmental consulting firm afloat, but what? Remember that policy change your company made 3 years ago? The one about prioritizing immediate returns over long-term community impact? It killed a lot of small firms, including hers. The weight of this revelation settled over Alexander like a heavy cloak. His own company's decisions had contributed to Elena's downfall. The same woman who had once helped shape his vision of ethical business practices had become a casualty of their abandonment. Victoria's voice floated in from the doorway. "Coming to bed?" "In a minute," he replied, his eyes still fixed on the city below. That night, as he lay awake beside his sleeping wife, Alexander made a decision. He would offer Elena a position heading a new division focused on sustainable community development. It wasn't just about making amends, it was about returning to the principles they'd once shared, about doing what was right. Little did he know. This decision would set in motion a chain of events that would challenge everything he thought he knew about success, love, and redemption. And the biggest surprise was still to come, one that would shake the very foundation of his carefully constructed world. The following morning, Alexander arrived at the hotel earlier than usual. He knew Elena would be setting up for breakfast service, and he wanted to catch her before the rush began. He found her in the empty restaurant, methodically arranging place settings with the same attention to detail she once applied to environmental impact reports. "Eleanor?" he called softly, not wanting to startle her. She straightened up slowly, her expression carefully neutral. "Mr. Sterling, the breakfast service doesn't begin for another hour." The formality in her voice stung, but he pressed on. "I think we're well past Mr. Sterling, don't you?" "Are we?" She continued arranging cutlery, her movements precise and deliberate. "Because from where I stand, we're exactly where we should be, employer and employee." Alexander moved closer, noting how she subtly shifted away. "This isn't right, Elena. You shouldn't be here, not like this. Not after everything you've accomplished." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. "Accomplished? Let's see. My consulting firm failed, I lost my house, and now I'm working 2 jobs to make ends meet. Quite the list of accomplishments. That's exactly why I'm here." He pulled out a chair, gesturing for her to sit. When she remained standing, he continued anyway. "I'm creating a new division within Sterling Enterprises, focused entirely on sustainable community development. I want you to lead it." Elena's hands stilled on the table. For a moment he saw a flicker of the passion that used to drive her, but it was quickly replaced by skepticism. "Why?" "Because you were right." The words tumbled out before he could polish them. "About everything. The importance of community impact, the need for sustainable development, the balance between profit and purpose. We lost our way, Elena. I lost my way." She studied him carefully, one hand resting protectively over her pregnant belly. "You want to ease your conscience." "No. I want to make things right. This isn't charity, Elena. This is business. Smart business. The kind we used to believe in." "The kind we used to believe in," she repeated softly, then shook her head. "Do you know what happened to the communities we were trying to help? While your company was prioritizing immediate returns, families lost their homes, small businesses went under, people's lives were destroyed." "Then help me fix it," he pressed. "You'll have complete autonomy, a substantial budget, your own team." "Stop." Elena's voice cut through his pitch like a blade. "Just stop. You think you can throw money at this and make everything better. That's always been your solution, hasn't it? But some things can't be fixed with a checkbook, Alexander." He fell silent, watching as she moved around the table, straightening already perfect place settings. Finally, he asked, "What happened to us, Elena? We used to want the same things." She paused, looking at him with eyes that held years of unspoken pain. "No, we wanted similar things for different reasons. I wanted to make a difference. You wanted to make a profit, while appearing to make a difference. There's a distinction. That's not fair, isn't it?" She glanced at the expensive watch on his wrist, the custom-made suit, the polished shoes. "Look at you now, Alexander. Everything you touch turns to gold. Everything except the things that really matter." Her words hit home with unexpected force. Before he could respond, the kitchen doors swung open as other staff members began arriving for their shifts. Elena straightened her uniform, her professional mask sliding back into place. "Thank you for the offer, Mr. Sterling, but I'll have to decline. I've already made other arrangements for my future." As she turned to leave, Alexander called after her, "What arrangements?" She paused but didn't turn around. "That's no longer your concern. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have tables to prepare." Alexander watched her walk away, feeling as though he'd lost her all over again. But something about her response nagged at him. What arrangements? What wasn't she telling him? His instincts, honed by years of business negotiations, told him there was more to this story than Elena was letting on. He pulled out his phone and dialed James again. "I need you to find out everything you can about Elena's current situation, where she lives, what she's planning, everything." "Alex," James warned, "some stones are better left unturned." "Not this one," Alexander insisted. "Something's not adding up and I need to know what it is." As he ended the call, he caught sight of his reflection in the restaurant's window. The successful billionaire stared back at him, every hair in place, every detail perfect. But for the first time in years, he wondered if success had cost him more than he'd realized. Victoria Sterling stood in her home office, staring at the photo displayed on her tablet. The image showed Elena leaving a small apartment building in the suburbs, holding the hand of a young boy. The timestamp indicated it was taken just yesterday. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" she asked the private investigator on her video call. "Yes, Mrs. Sterling, the boy is 6 years old. I've verified his birth certificate and school records." Victoria's perfectly manicured nails tapped against her desk. "And Alexander doesn't know?" "As far as we can tell, he has no idea he has a son." After ending the call, Victoria sank into her leather chair, her mind racing. She'd always known there were unresolved aspects of Alexander's past with Elena. But this was beyond anything she'd imagined. The timing aligned perfectly. The boy would have been conceived just before their divorce. Meanwhile, across town, James Morrison sat in his car outside Elena's apartment, wrestling with his conscience. The file on his passenger seat contained everything Alexander had asked for: Elena's current address, her work schedule, her financial situation. But the most crucial information, about her son, about Alexander's son, weighed heavily on his mind. His phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. "What did you find?" James stared at the message, remembering the day 6 years ago when Eleanor had come to him, tears in her eyes begging him not to tell Alexander about her pregnancy. "He's building his empire," she'd said. "A child would only be an inconvenience." Now, before he could respond to the text, movement caught his eye. Elena was walking up the street, still in her hotel uniform, her pregnant belly more noticeable in the afternoon light. Behind her, a young boy skipped along, his backpack bouncing with each step. James's heart clenched as he watched them. The boy was the spitting image of Alexander at that age, the same determined jaw, the same confident stride. Elena stopped suddenly, her eyes locking onto James's car. He could see the moment recognition dawned on her face, followed quickly by understanding. She ushered the boy inside the building, then walked purposefully toward the car. James rolled down his window as she approached. "Eleanor? He sent you, didn't he?" Her voice was tight with controlled anger. "He's worried about you." "No, he's curious about me. There's a difference." She glanced back at her building. "How much does he know?" "Nothing yet." "But Elena, he's going to find out. You can't keep this hidden forever." She leaned against the car door, suddenly looking exhausted. "I managed for 6 years. And now you're pregnant again, working 2 jobs, and he's back in your life. Things are different." Elena's hand moved protectively to her belly. "This baby has nothing to do with Alexander. My life, my children, none of it concerns him anymore." "Marcus looks just like him," James said softly. The name hung in the air between them. Elena stepped back as if she'd been struck. "You know his name?" "I know everything, Elena. That's my job." He pulled the file from his passenger seat. "Alexander asked me to find out about your current situation. He's going to know about Marcus soon enough. Wouldn't it be better if it came from you?" Elena's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "Better for whom? For Alexander's conscience? For his perfect life with his perfect wife? Or for my son who's grown up just fine without a father? For all of you, James replied, because secrets like this have a way of causing more pain the longer they're kept. Inside the apartment building, Marcus pressed his face against the window, watching his mother talk to the strange man in the car. At 6, he was already unusually perceptive. He noticed how his mother's shoulders tensed, how she kept glancing. Back at their building, how her hand trembled slightly as she pushed her hair behind her ear, all signs that something was wrong. He'd seen the man before, in old photos his mother kept in a box under her bed. Photos of her smiling next to him and another man, a man whose face Marcus sometimes caught glimpses of on business magazines at the grocery store. He didn't know why his mother kept those photos, hidden, but he knew they made her sad. Back outside, Elena straightened up, her composure returning. I appreciate your concern, James, but my answer is still no. Alexander made his choice years ago. He chose his empire over everything else. I chose my son. We both have to live with those decisions. Eleanor, James called as she turned to leave. Victoria knows. She froze mid-step. What? Alexander's wife. She hired her own investigator. She knows about Marcus. Elena's face paled. Has she told Alexander? Not yet. But she will. You know she will. For the first time, James saw real fear cross Elena's face. She glanced up at her apartment window, where Marcus quickly ducked out of sight. When she looked back at James, her expression had hardened into determination. Then I guess I have some decisions to make. She turned and walked away, her steps quick and purposeful. James watched her disappear into the building, then pulled out his phone. He stared at Alexander's unanswered text for a long moment before typing, "We need to talk in person. It's important." The response came immediately. My office, 1 hour. As James drove toward Sterling Enterprises headquarters, he couldn't help but think about the waves this revelation would create. Alexander's carefully controlled world was about to be turned upside down, and there would be no going back. Alexander's office occupied the entire top floor of Sterling Enterprises headquarters, offering a panoramic view of the city he'd helped shape. As James stepped out of the elevator, he found his friend standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows, hands clasped behind his back. "You're making me nervous, James," Alexander said without turning around. What's so important it couldn't be shared over the phone? James placed the file on Alexander's desk but didn't open it. "You might want to sit down for this." "I'll stand." "Alex, just tell me." Alexander finally turned, his expression tense. "Is Elena in some kind of trouble? Does she need money? Whatever it is, we can fix it." James shook his head slowly. "This isn't something you can fix with money, Alex. It's about your son." The words hung in the air like smoke. Alexander's face went through a rapid series of emotions: confusion, disbelief, understanding, shock. What are you talking about?" James opened the file, revealing a school photo of Marcus. "His name is Marcus Martinez. He's 6 years old. He lives with Elena in a small apartment on the east side of town. He's in 1st grade, top of his class. He plays soccer on Saturdays and takes art classes on Sundays. And he has your eyes, Alex, your smile too." Alexander sank into his chair, his legs no longer able to support him. His hands trembled as he picked up the photo, studying the boy's face with an intensity that spoke of years of lost time. 6 years, he whispered. "She was pregnant when you were too busy building your empire to notice," James finished. "Yes." Alexander's head snapped up, anger flashing in his eyes. "You knew? All this time you knew I had a son?" "Elena made me promise not to tell you. She said you'd made your choice, the company over family. She didn't want your money or your divided attention." "That wasn't her decision to make." Alexander slammed his fist on the desk, sending papers flying. "He's my son. I had a right to know." "Did you?" James's quiet question cut through Alexander's anger. "Think back, Alex, really think. When Elena tried to talk to you about the future, about family, what did you say? When she suggested taking a step back from expansion to focus on what you'd already built, how did you respond?" The memories rushed back with painful clarity. Late nights at the office, missed dinners, postponed vacations. Eleanor's increasingly desperate attempts to discuss their future met with distracted nods and promises of later. The final argument, where he'd told her she was holding him back, that she didn't understand his vision. "Oh God," he breathed, dropping his head into his hands. "What have I done?" "The question is, what are you going to do now?" James asked. "Because there's more you need to know. Victoria's already aware of Marcus. She hired her own investigator." Alexander's head shot up. "Victoria knows. And she's wrestling with how to handle it. You need to talk to her, Alex, before this situation explodes in everyone's faces." As if on cue, Alexander's office door opened and Victoria walked in. She stopped short at the sight of James and the scattered papers on the desk. Her eyes found the photo in Alexander's hands, and her expression hardened. "I see James has finally told you," she said, her voice carefully controlled. "I wondered how long it would take." Alexander stood slowly. "How long have you known?" "Long enough to understand why Elena refused your job. Offer." Victoria moved further into the office, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "Did you really think you could just walk back into her life, wave your checkbook, and make everything better?" "Victoria, I can explain." "Explain what? That you had no idea you had a son? That the woman serving coffee in our hotel is the mother of your child? That while we've been discussing expansion plans and profit margins, there's been a little boy out there with your DNA growing up, without a father?" Her words struck Alexander like physical blows. He sank back into his chair, the photo of Marcus still clutched in his hand. "What do you want me to do?" he asked quietly. Victoria's expression softened slightly. "It's not about what I want, Alexander. It's about what's right. That boy deserves to know his father, and you deserve a chance to know your son." "And us?" Alexander looked up at his wife, fear evident in his eyes. "What does this mean for us?" Victoria moved to stand beside him, her hand coming to rest on his shoulder. "That depends on how we handle this, all of us, because like it or not, our lives are now intertwined with Elena's and Marcus's in ways we never expected." James quietly excused himself, leaving the couple to their discussion. As he rode the elevator down, he pulled out his phone to text Elena. "He knows, Victoria too, ball's in your court now." The response came several minutes later. "Tell them to meet me at the park near my apartment tomorrow at 4. It's time Marcus knew the truth too." James stared at the message, wondering how a single day could change so many lives so dramatically. Tomorrow would bring conversations that would reshape their future, all of their futures. The only question was whether they were ready for what those changes would bring. The autumn sun cast long shadows across Jefferson Park as Elena sat on a bench, watching Marcus play on the swings. Her son pumped his legs energetically, trying to go higher and higher, his laughter carrying across the playground. She checked her phone again, 3:55 p.m. In 5 minutes, everything would change. She had spent the morning trying to explain to Marcus why today was special, why they needed to meet someone important. But how do you tell a 6-year-old that his world is about to shift on its axis? "Marcus is very intuitive," she had told James on the phone earlier. "He needs to feel in control of the situation. We can't just spring this on him." Now, watching her son's carefree play, Elena's heart ached with the weight of what was to come. She spotted Alexander and Victoria first, walking along the path that led to the playground. Alexander had traded his usual business suit for casual wear, dark jeans and a blue sweater that made him look more approachable, more human. Victoria, elegant as always in cream-colored pants and a cashmere top, walked slightly behind him, her face a mask of careful neutrality. Marcus noticed them too. He slowed his swinging, his eyes narrowing with the same analytical expression he often wore when solving his puzzle games. Eleanor beckoned him over, and he approached cautiously, standing close to her side. "Marcus," Eleanor said softly, "remember what we talked about this morning, about meeting someone special?" The boy nodded, his eyes fixed on Alexander, who had stopped a few feet away, looking as nervous as Elena had ever seen him. "Hello, Marcus," Alexander said, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus's grip on Elena's hand tightened. "You're the man from the pictures," he said. "The ones Mom keeps in the box under her bed." Alexander glanced at Elena, surprise and pain flickering across his face. "Yes, I am. My name is Alexander Sterling." "I know who you are," Marcus replied, his chin lifting slightly. "I saw you on the magazine at the grocery store. Mom was crying when she saw it too, but she thought I was asleep." Elena felt her cheeks flush as both Alexander and Victoria turned to look at her. She hadn't known Marcus had seen that moment of weakness, late one night when a business magazine had featured Alexander on its cover, celebrating his latest acquisition. "Marcus," Elena began, but her son cut her off. "Are you my father?" The question came out clear and direct, stunning everyone into silence. Alexander took a step forward, then stopped when Marcus shifted closer to his mother. "Yes, I am. Where were you?" The simple question carried the weight of 6 years of absence. Alexander's composed facade cracked, revealing raw emotion beneath. I made mistakes, Marcus. Big ones. I didn't know about you, but that's not an excuse. I should have been there." Marcus processed this information with a seriousness that seemed beyond his years. "Mum says mistakes are okay if you learn from them and try to fix them." He looked up at Elena. "Right, Mum." Elena squeezed, his hand fighting back tears. "That's right, sweetheart." Victoria, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward. "Marcus, I'm Victoria. I brought something for you." She pulled a small package from her bag. "Your father mentioned you like puzzles." Marcus looked at the gift, then at his mother for permission. When Elena nodded, he accepted the package, carefully unwrapping it to reveal a complex 3D puzzle. "It's a model of the Stellar Heights Hotel," Victoria explained, "where your mother works. We thought, maybe you'd like to see the real thing sometime." The boy's eyes lit up despite his attempt to maintain his serious expression. "The one with the big glass elevator. Mum says it's the most eco-friendly building in the city." "She's right," Alexander said, seizing the opportunity. "Your mother helped design many of its environmental features. Did you know that?" Marcus turned to Elena, surprise evident on his face. "You did?" "A long time ago," Elena admitted. "Before you were born." "Is that why you work there now?" Marcus asked. The innocent question landed like a punch to Alexander's gut. He watched Elena struggle to maintain her composure as she answered, "That's complicated, sweetheart." "Everything's complicated," Marcus declared, with the certainty of a child who has heard that word too often. He turned back to Alexander and Victoria. "Do you have other kids?" "No," Victoria answered gently. "We don't." "Then why do you want me now?" The question held no anger, just genuine curiosity. Alexander knelt down to Marcus's eye level, careful to maintain enough distance not to make the boy uncomfortable. "Because you're my son. Because I've missed 6 years of your life, and I don't want to miss anymore. Because even though I didn't know about you, I should have been there. And because," his voice cracked slightly, "because I'd like a chance to learn how to be your father if you'll let me." Marcus studied Alexander's face with an intensity that reminded everyone present of Elena's penetrating gaze. Finally, he said, "I have a soccer game on Saturday. Mum says I'm getting better at defense." Alexander's face lit up with cautious hope. "Would it be okay if Victoria and I came to watch?" Marcus looked at his mother, then back at Alexander. "You have to sit with Mum. And you can't wear a suit. Nobody wears suits to soccer games." A small laugh escaped Victoria's lips, breaking the tension. "I'll make sure he dresses appropriately." Elena watched as her son began explaining the rules of his soccer league to Alexander and Victoria, his initial reserve gradually melting into cautious enthusiasm. The sight stirred complicated emotions in her heart. Relief that Marcus wasn't rejecting his father outright. Fear about what these changes would mean for their carefully constructed life. And an unexpected twist of something else when she saw how naturally Alexander took to listening to their son. The boardroom of Sterling Enterprises hummed with tension as Alexander faced his executive team. The morning sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the concerned faces around. The massive oak table. He had just finished explaining his plan to create a new division focused on sustainable community development, and to appoint Elena as its head. "Let me get this straight," Richard Blackwood, the CFO, leaned forward in his chair. "You want to invest millions in a division led by your ex-wife, who currently works as a server in your hotel. Eleanor has more experience in sustainable development than anyone in this room," Alexander replied firmly. "Her previous consulting firm—" "Her failed consulting firm," Richard interrupted. "Failed because of our own short-sighted policies," Alexander shot back. "Policies that I approved, that we all approved, prioritizing quick returns over lasting impact." Victoria, sitting at the other end of the table, watched the exchange with careful attention. Since the meeting in the park 3 days ago, she had observed a profound change in her husband. The discovery of Marcus had sparked something in him, a desire not just to make amends, but to return to the principles he'd once championed. "The market conditions," another executive began. "The market conditions are exactly why we need this division," Alexander cut in. "Our investors are increasingly demanding sustainable practices. Our clients want to know their money is making a positive impact. Elena's vision for community-based development isn't just ethically right, it's good business." "And the personal complications," Richard pressed. "Having your ex-wife, the mother of your recently discovered son, in a leadership position, the potential for scandal, is far less damaging than continuing to ignore our social responsibilities," Victoria interrupted, her voice cutting through the tension. All eyes turned to her. "Gentlemen, I've reviewed Elena's proposals from her consulting days. They were innovative, practical, and precisely what this company needs now. Yes, there are personal complications, but there are also opportunities." Alexander shot his wife a grateful look. Their late-night discussions about this decision had been intense but ultimately strengthening. Victoria had surprised him with her pragmatic approach to the situation, her ability to separate personal feelings from business potential. "The board won't like it," Richard warned. "The board will see the numbers," Victoria countered, sliding tablets across the table. "I've prepared projections showing how Elena's community development models could increase our long-term profitability, while significantly reducing our environmental impact. Take a look." As the executives studied the data, Alexander's phone buzzed. With a text from Elena. "Marcus got an A on his science project. He wants to know if you'll come to the school showcase next week." A smile tugged at his lips as he typed back, "Wouldn't miss it." The past few days had been a crash course in fatherhood. He'd attended Marcus's soccer game as promised, cheering from the sidelines while trying to learn the names of his son's teammates. He'd discovered that Marcus inherited not just his looks, but his analytical mind, showing a precocious interest in how things worked. The boy had peppered him with questions about the hotel's environmental systems, revealing an understanding that went beyond his years. "Alex?" Victoria's voice brought him back to the present. The executives were looking at him expectantly. "The projections are conservative," he said, returning to business mode. "Eleanor's actual track record suggests we could see even better results. But more importantly, this is our chance to correct course, to prove that profit and purpose aren't mutually exclusive." "And if she refuses again?" Richard asked. Alexander exchanged a glance with Victoria. They hadn't told the executive team about Elena's pregnancy, about the complex web of personal and professional considerations at play. "She won't," he said with quiet confidence, "because this time the offer isn't about charity or guilt. It's about building something meaningful for everyone involved." After the meeting, Victoria found Alexander in his office, staring at a photo of Marcus on his phone. "That went better than expected," she said, closing the door behind her. "Thanks to you." He looked up at his wife. "I know this isn't easy. For you?" Victoria moved to perch on the edge of his desk. "None of this is easy, Alexander, but it's necessary. For the company, for Marcus, for all of us." She paused, studying his face. "Have you told Elena about the board meeting?" "Not yet. I wanted to wait until we had preliminary approval from the executive team. And now, Alexander stood, walking, to the window. The city stretched out below, a maze of buildings and streets, lives intersecting in countless ways. Somewhere out there, his son was proudly showing off his science project, while Elena worked another shift at the hotel. Now comes the hard part, he said, convincing Elena that this isn't just another business decision, that we're really ready to change, all of us. Victoria came to stand beside him. Then maybe we should start by changing how we make the offer. At his questioning look, she continued, instead of another business meeting, let's invite her to dinner, at our home, to discuss everything, the division, Marcus's future, how we can all move forward together. Alexander turned to his wife, amazement and gratitude washing over him. Have I told you lately how remarkable you are? Not nearly enough, she smiled. Now call Elena and Alexander. This time listen to what she's not saying as much as what she is. Elena stood outside the Sterling's penthouse, her hand hovering over the doorbell. The evening air was crisp and the city lights sparkled below like scattered diamonds. She smoothed her navy blue dress, one of the few professional outfits that still fit comfortably over her growing belly, and took a deep breath. We don't have to do this, Marcus said beside her, looking sharp in his new button-down shirt. And khakis. We can go home and watch movies instead. Elena smiled at her son's protective instinct. Sometimes, sweetheart, we need to face difficult situations to make things better. Before Marcus could respond, the door opened, revealing Victoria in an elegant yet casual ensemble. I thought I heard voices. Please, come in. The penthouse was exactly as Eleanor remembered from architectural magazines, a masterpiece of modern design with warm touches that softened its edges. The smell of cooking wafted from the kitchen, where Alexander appeared wearing an apron over his casual clothes. You cook now? Elena couldn't hide her surprise. Victoria taught me, Alexander replied, a slight flush coloring his cheeks, though I'm still learning. He's mastered exactly 3 dishes, Victoria added with a smile. Fortunately, one of them is Marcus's favorite, pasta with meatballs. Marcus's eyes lit up. How did you know? Your mother mentioned it, Victoria said, guiding them to the living room. Would you like to see our collection of vintage board games while dinner finishes cooking? As Victoria showed Marcus the game cabinet, Elena noticed how naturally the other woman interacted with her son. There was no forced cheerfulness, no awkward attempts to buy his affection, just genuine interest and respect for his personality. Alexander appeared with a tray of drinks, sparkling water for Elena, juice for Marcus, and wine for himself, and Victoria. Dinner will be ready in 15 minutes. I thought we could talk first. Elena nodded, settling onto the plush sofa. Marcus was already engrossed in examining an antique chess set with Victoria, giving the adults some space to talk. The executive team approved the new division, Alexander began, his voice low. Full autonomy, substantial budget, everything we discussed. Alexander, Eleanor started, but he held up a hand. Please, let me finish. This isn't just about business anymore. It's about legacy, the one we once dreamed of creating together, the one we need to create for Marcus. Elena glanced at their son, who was demonstrating his chess skills to an impressed Victoria. He's doing fine without fancy legacies. Is he? Alexander's question was gentle but pointed. He's brilliant, Elena. The questions he asks about environmental systems, his understanding of complex problems, he has so much potential. Potential that shouldn't be limited by, he hesitated. By his mother's financial situation, Eleanor finished, her voice sharp. By our past mistakes, Alexander corrected. Both of ours. Victoria joined them, leaving Marcus absorbed in the chess set. Elena, we've been thinking about Marcus's future, about the baby's future too. Her hand gestured subtly toward Elena's pregnancy. This division isn't just a job, offer. It's a chance to rebuild something meaningful for all of us. Elena felt tears threatening and blamed the hormones. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple at all, Victoria acknowledged. It's messy and complicated, and probably going to be difficult. But isn't that better than pretending we can keep our lives separately boxed up? From the other room, Marcus called out, "Mom, come look at this chess piece. It's carved like a dragon." Elena moved to stand, but Alexander was already heading toward their son. "Actually, Marcus, that's a griffin. Want to hear the story behind it?" They watched as Alexander sat beside Marcus, launching into a tale about the ancient chess set's history. The boy listened intently, asking intelligent questions that made Alexander beam with pride. "He's good with him," Eleanor admitted quietly to Victoria. "He's trying," Victoria replied. "We both are. The question is, will you let us?" Elena turned to face her successor, the woman who now shared her ex-husband's life. "Why are you doing this, Victoria? Really? Most women wouldn't want their husband's ex-wife and secret child anywhere near their lives." Victoria's answer was thoughtful. "Because I've watched Alexander these past few days. He's more alive, more purposeful than I've seen him in years. Because Marcus deserves to know his father. And because—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Because sometimes the right thing to do isn't the easy thing." The timer in the kitchen chimed and Alexander called out, "Dinner's ready." As they moved toward the dining room, Marcus slipped his hand into Elena's. "Mom, can we come back sometime? Victoria says they have more games and Dad wants to teach me about sustainable architecture." Dad. The word hung in the air, causing Alexander to freeze mid-step. It was the first time Marcus had called him that. Elena squeezed her son's hand, feeling the weight of the moment. "We'll see, sweetheart. First, let's enjoy dinner." But as they settled around the table, Eleanor caught Alexander wiping his eyes quickly, and she saw Victoria discreetly squeezing her husband's hand under the table. Perhaps, she thought, there was hope for this strange new family they were creating. The Sterling Enterprises conference room buzzed with anticipation as Elena stood at the podium, her pregnancy now visible beneath her professional attire. 2 weeks had passed since the dinner at the penthouse, and today she would present her vision for the new Sustainable Communities Division to the board of directors. Alexander sat at the head of the table, trying to maintain his professional composure despite his pride in watching Elena command the room. Victoria, beside him, subtly adjusted the presentation remote when Elena struggled to reach. "Charity, sustainable development isn't just about green buildings and solar panels," Elena began, her voice strong and clear. "It's about creating communities that thrive, where environmental responsibility meets social progress. For too long, we've treated these as separate goals. Today, I'm going to show you how they're inseparable." As Elena launched into her presentation, Alexander's phone vibrated. A text from Marcus's teacher. "Your son's environmental project won first place in the science fair." He cited Sterling Enterprises' green initiatives in his research. Alexander showed the message to Victoria, who smiled warmly. They'd spent the previous weekend giving Marcus a tour of the hotel's environmental systems, watching as the boy absorbed every detail with remarkable understanding. Elena's voice brought their attention back to the presentation. "Our pilot project will focus on revitalizing the East Side district. Yes, the same area where many of our hotel staff currently live." She met Alexander's eyes briefly. "We'll work with local communities to create affordable, sustainable housing, implement green energy solutions, and establish training programs for sustainable business practices." Richard Blackwood, still skeptical, raised his hand. "The initial investment is substantial. How can we ensure returns?" Elena's response was ready. "By thinking long-term. Our current model prioritizes immediate profits, but it creates hidden costs, environmental damage, community displacement, social instability. These eventually affect our bottom line through increased operational costs, regulatory challenges, and reputational damage." She clicked to the next slide, showing a complex but clear analysis of long-term cost savings and revenue projections. "By investing in sustainable communities now, we reduce future risks while creating new revenue streams through green energy implementation, sustainable property management, and community-based enterprises." Victoria watched the board members' expressions, shift from skepticism to interest. Eleanor's presentation wasn't just about environmental responsibility. It was about smart business, about adapting to a changing world while leading the change themselves. As Elena concluded, applause filled the room. Board members approached her with questions and comments, their initial reservations about her appointment seemingly forgotten in the face of her evident expertise. Later that afternoon, Eleanor found herself in her new office, a bright corner, space with views of the city she hoped to help transform. A knock at the door revealed Alexander. "The board was impressed," he said, entering with 2 cups of tea. "Even Richard admitted your projections were solid." "Careful," Elena smiled, accepting the tea. That almost sounds like a compliment from him. They stood by the window in comfortable silence, looking out at the city. Finally, Alexander spoke. "Marcus asked me something interesting yesterday." "Oh?" "He wanted to know if the baby would be his brother or sister. I didn't know how to answer." Elena's hand moved to her belly. "Carlos and I weren't planning to find out the gender before birth." Alexander nodded, processing the mention of Elena's boyfriend, the father of her current pregnancy. They hadn't discussed him much, respecting the boundaries of their new arrangement. "Marcus seems excited about being a big brother," Alexander observed. "He is. He's already planning to teach the baby all about chess and soccer." Elena paused, then added softly, "Carlos is being transferred to London next month. We've decided not to continue the relationship." Alexander absorbed this information carefully. "Are you okay?" "Yes," Elena answered, surprising herself with how true it felt. "It was mutual. He has his path and I have this." She gestured to the office, to the city beyond. A chance to build something meaningful again. Speaking of building, Alexander pulled out his phone, showing her the text from Marcus's teacher. "It seems our son is following in our footsteps." Our son. The phrase no longer felt strange or painful. It felt like truth. "Victoria mentioned he's been sketching building designs," Elena said. "She's been teaching him about architectural principles." "She adores him," Alexander admitted. "Sometimes I find them hunched over her drafting table, discussing the aerodynamics of his paper airplane designs." Elena smiled, remembering how Victoria had insisted on hosting Marcus's science fair celebration dinner, complete with a cake decorated with solar panels and wind turbines. "We're creating something unusual here, aren't we?" she mused. "This strange blended family of ours." "Unusual but good," Alexander replied. "Like your sustainable communities, finding balance in unexpected places." A notification popped up on both their phones, a reminder for Marcus's soccer game that weekend. They'd all be there, Elena, Alexander, Victoria, even James, watching their boy play, cheering him on together. "I should get back to work," Elena said, moving toward her desk. "The East Side project won't plan itself." Alexander headed for the door but paused. "Elena, thank you for giving us this chance, all of us." She looked up from her computer, where architectural plans for sustainable housing were already taking shape. "Thank you for making it worth taking." As Alexander left, Elena turned back to her work, one hand resting on her growing belly, the other sketching out plans for a future that looked nothing like she'd imagined, but somehow felt exactly right. The East Side Community Center bustled with activity as residents gathered for the first public presentation of Sterling Enterprises' Sustainable Housing Initiative. Elena stood before the crowd, now 7 months pregnant, her confidence evident as she addressed the community's concerns. "We're not here to gentrify your neighborhood," she assured them, pointing to the detailed plans displayed on the screen. "We're here to work with you, to build what you need, to create opportunities that benefit everyone." In the back of the room, Alexander watched with pride as Elena fielded questions with grace and honesty. Beside him, Marcus sat taking notes in his special project notebook, a gift from Victoria for documenting his observations about sustainable architecture. Mrs. Martinez, an elderly woman, stood up, her voice trembling with emotion. "We've heard promises before, Big companies come in, talk about improvement, and next thing we know, we can't afford to live here anymore. How is this different? Elena's response was immediate and passionate. Because I live here too. This is my community, my home. My son goes to school here. She gestured to Marcus, who straightened in his chair. Every decision we make will prioritize current residents. The affordable housing units aren't just a percentage of the project. They're the foundation of it. And the jobs, someone else called out. Will locals get real opportunities or just construction work? Actually, Victoria stepped forward, surprising everyone. My colleague has a proposal for that. She nodded to Elena, who clicked to the next slide. The Sterling Environmental Training Institute, Elena announced, a fully funded program. Offering certification in sustainable construction, solar installation, green energy management, and environmental systems maintenance. Every graduate will be guaranteed job placement within the project. Murmurs of interest rippled through the crowd. Alexander noticed several young people leaning forward, clearly intrigued by the prospect of career training. After the presentation, as community members clustered around the display boards discussing the plans, Marcus tugged on Elena's sleeve. "Mom, can I show them my ideas too?" Elena glanced at Alexander, who nodded encouragingly. "Go ahead, sweetheart." Marcus pulled out his notebook, flipping to carefully drawn sketches of playground equipment that doubled as small-scale renewable energy demonstrations. "See, when kids play on the swings, it generates power for the water fountain, and the merry-go-round could help pump water for the community garden." The residents gathered around, impressed by the boys' innovative thinking. "You designed these yourself?" the elderly woman from earlier asked. "Victoria helped me with the technical parts," Marcus explained, "and Mr. Sterling, showed me how to calculate the energy outputs." Alexander's heart swelled at hearing Marcus call him Dad in public, even if he'd quickly corrected himself. These moments were becoming more frequent, but each one still felt precious. Later that evening, as they packed up the presentation materials, Elena winced, pressing a hand to her lower back. "You should be resting more," Victoria said quickly, moving to help her with a heavy portfolio. "I'm fine," Elena insisted, but accepted the assistance. "There's too much work to do." "The work will still be here tomorrow," Alexander interjected. "You need to take care of yourself and the baby." Elena was about to argue when Marcus spoke up. "Mom, remember what you always tell me. You can't help others if you don't take care of yourself first." The adults exchanged amused glances at hearing Elena's own words used against her. She sighed in defeat. "When did you get so wise?" "Probably around the same time he started teaching me about environmental impact assessments." Victoria smiled. "Speaking of which, Marcus, how would you like to help me review some designs tomorrow? We could use a fresh perspective." Marcus's eyes lit up, but he looked to his mother for permission. Elena nodded. "As long as you finish your homework first." "Already done," he announced proudly. "Dad helped me with my math during the presentation break." This time he didn't correct himself. On the drive home, Elena noticed Marcus was unusually quiet. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" "Mom, when the baby comes, will I still get to spend time with Dad and Victoria?" Elena reached back to squeeze his hand. "Of course you will. They're part of our family now, just in a different way than we expected." "And the baby? Will they be part of it too?" "They already are," Elena assured him. "Victoria's been helping me decorate the nursery, remember? And your father's already talking about setting up a college fund." Marcus seemed to consider this. "Good, because I want to teach the baby about sustainable architecture too. Victoria says it's never too early to start learning." Elena laughed, but her amusement was interrupted by a sharp pain. She tried to hide her discomfort, but Marcus noticed. "Mom, are you okay?" "Just tired, sweetheart. It's been a long day." But as they pulled into their apartment complex, another wave of pain hit, stronger this time. Elena grabbed her phone, finding Alexander's number with trembling fingers. "Elena," his voice answered immediately. "What's wrong?" I think I need to go to the hospital. Something's not right." She could hear him already moving, Victoria's concerned voice in the background. "We're on our way. Don't move. James is closer. I'm calling him now to pick you up." Elena ended the call, turning to her son's worried face. "Marcus, honey, we need to be brave now, okay? Everything's going to be fine, but we need to go to the hospital to make sure the baby's all right." Marcus nodded solemnly, his small hand finding hers. "I'll help you, Mom, and Dad's coming too. We'll all help." Elena squeezed his hand, fighting back tears at her son's strength. In that moment, she was grateful for their unusual family arrangement, because sometimes the best support comes from unexpected places. The hospital waiting room was quiet, except for the soft hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional squeak of nurses' shoes on linoleum. Victoria sat with Marcus, helping him work on his homework to keep his mind occupied. Alexander paced, his usual composed demeanor nowhere in sight. James arrived with coffee for everyone, ruffling Marcus's hair as he passed. "Any news?" "The doctors are still running tests," Alexander replied, accepting a cup gratefully. "They say it might be stress-related complications." Marcus looked up from his textbook. "Is that because Mom's been working too hard?" Victoria smoothed his hair back into place. "Your mom is very dedicated to helping people. Sometimes that means she forgets to take care of herself. Like the time I got so excited about my science project that I forgot to eat lunch?" Marcus asked. "Exactly like that," Victoria smiled. "Which is why we all need to help remind her to rest sometimes." A doctor emerged from the examination area, and Alexander immediately stepped forward. The others watched as they spoke in low voices, relief gradually spreading across Alexander's face. "Everything's okay," he announced, turning to the group. "They want to keep Elena overnight for observation, but she and the baby are both fine. She just needs to reduce her stress levels and rest more." "Can we see her?" Marcus asked. The doctor nodded. "Family only for now and just for a few minutes." "That's all of us," Marcus declared firmly, taking both Alexander and Victoria's hands. "We're all family." The doctor's eyebrows rose slightly, but she didn't comment on the unusual group as she led them to Elena's room. Elena was propped up in bed, looking tired but relieved. Her face brightened when Marcus rushed to her side. "Hey, sweetheart, I'm sorry I scared you. Are you and the baby okay?" "We're fine," Elena assured him, making room for him to sit on the edge of the bed. "The baby was just telling me to slow down a little." "Good," Marcus said seriously, "because Victoria and I already made a plan. She's going to help you with work stuff, and Dad's going to make sure you eat proper lunches, and I'm going to remind you to rest, just like you do for me." Eleanor's eyes met Victoria's over Marcus's head. "You don't have to do that. You're already so busy with your own work." "Actually," Victoria moved closer, "I've been thinking about scaling back my other projects. The East Side Initiative is important, and you shouldn't have to carry it alone." Alexander added, "We've already discussed it. Victoria will co-direct the division with you, split the workload, share the responsibility." "And the board approved this?" Elena asked skeptically. "The board," Alexander smiled, "is more concerned about keeping you healthy and the project on track than about traditional corporate structures. Besides, Victoria's environmental engineering background complements your community development expertise perfectly." Elena looked at the unlikely family gathered around her hospital bed, her ex-husband, his current wife, their shared son, and even James hovering supportively in the doorway. 6 months ago, this scene would have seemed impossible. "Thank you," she said softly. "All of you." "That's what family does," Marcus stated, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world, "even if we're a different kind of family." A nurse appeared in the doorway. "I need to check Mrs. Martinez's vitals now." "You can come back in the morning." "I want to stay with Mom," Marcus protested. "Sweetheart, you need proper rest too," Eleanor said. "Why don't you go home with Dad and Victoria tonight? They'll bring you back first thing in the morning." Marcus considered this, then nodded. "Promise you'll rest?" "I promise." As they prepared to leave, Victoria hung back for a moment. "Eleanor, I meant what I said about helping with the division, but it's not just about work. We're in this together now, all of us." Eleanor felt tears, threatening again. Definitely the hormones, she told herself. I'm starting to believe that might not be such a bad thing. No, Victoria agreed, squeezing her hand. It might be exactly what we all needed. After they left, Elena lay in the quiet hospital room, one hand resting on her belly where the baby moved restlessly. The day's events had shown her something important, that family wasn't always about blood or marriage. Sometimes it was about choice, about people coming together in unexpected ways to support each other. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, sent from Victoria's phone. Dad says we can bring breakfast tomorrow. What kind of pancakes do you want? Victoria makes really good ones with blueberries. Elena smiled, typing back, Blueberry sounds perfect. Love you, sweetheart. The response came quickly. Love you too, Mom. Victoria says to sleep well, and Dad says he's handling everything at work, so don't worry. James says hi too, see you tomorrow. Elena set the phone aside, feeling more peaceful than she had in months. Sometimes life's biggest challenges led to its greatest blessings, even if those blessings came in unexpected packages. The autumn. Breeze rustled through the trees at the Eastside construction site as Elena and Victoria led a group of community members and reporters through what would soon become the Sterling Environmental Training Institute. At 8 months pregnant, Elena had finally agreed to reduce her on-site hours, but she refused to miss this milestone. The solar panel installation training area will be here, Victoria explained, pointing to a partially completed structure. We're using the latest technology, ensuring our graduates will be qualified for top-tier positions in the sustainable energy sector. And the community center? Asked a local reporter, notepad in hand. Elena stepped forward, her hand resting on her lower back. That's actually a special project we're particularly excited about. Marcus, would you like to explain? Marcus emerged from behind his father, clutching his design notebook. Over the past month, his playground energy collection system had evolved into a full-fledged community center design, with input from both Victoria's architectural expertise and Elena's community development experience. The community center will be totally self-sustaining, he began, his voice clear and confident. The playground equipment generates power, the roof has solar panels, and there's a greenhouse where people can learn about organic farming. Alexander watched proudly as his son fielded questions from the impressed reporters. In the 3 months since Elena's hospital scare, their unusual family had found its rhythm. Victoria and Elena had become an unexpectedly effective team, their different perspectives strengthening the project. Marcus split his time between both homes. His bedroom at Alexander and Victoria's now decorated with sustainable architecture posters and his own design sketches. Mr. Sterling, a reporter called out, how do you respond to criticism that this project is too ambitious for the current market? Before Alexander could answer, Eleanor stepped in. Actually, we've already received commitments from 3 major tech companies to hire our first graduating class of certified technicians. The market isn't just ready for this, it's demanding it. And the community response? Another reporter asked. Victoria gestured to the group of local residents touring the site. We have a waiting list for both the housing units and the training programs. But more importantly, we have community engagement. Every decision, from the building materials to the class schedules, has been made in consultation with local residents. As the tour continued, James approached Alexander with a concerned expression. The board's asking for an emergency meeting. The market volatility is making some members nervous about the project's scale. Alexander nodded, having expected this challenge. Schedule it for tomorrow morning. And James, make sure the community testimonials are ready. The board needs to understand this isn't just about profit margins. Later that afternoon, as the sun began to set, the family gathered in Elena's new office overlooking the construction site. Marcus was showing Victoria his latest design modifications, while Elena reviewed project timelines with Alexander. The first housing units will be ready next month, Elena said, suppressing a yawn. Just in time for you to focus on the baby, Alexander finished firmly. Victoria and I can handle the move-ins. Speaking of the baby, Victoria interjected, looking up from Marcus's drawings. "Have you decided about the nursery at our place?" Elena hesitated. It had been Victoria's idea, setting up a second nursery in their penthouse so the baby could stay close to Marcus during his time there. The gesture had touched Elena deeply, even as it highlighted the complexity of their situation. "Are you sure you want to do that?" Elena asked. "This baby isn't what?" Marcus looked up. "Isn't family. You said we're all family now. Remember?" The adults exchanged glances, moved by Marcus's simple wisdom. "Your brother or sister will need a place to stay when they visit," Victoria said firmly. "Just like you have your room," Alexander added softly. "If you're comfortable with it, Elena." Elena looked around the room. At Marcus's eager face, Victoria's gentle smile, Alexander's supportive expression. I think the baby would like that." A knock at the door interrupted the moment. A young woman from the community training program entered, carrying preliminary graduation certificates for Elena and Victoria to sign. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, "but we wanted to show you something." She led them to the window, pointing to the construction site below. The setting sun illuminated a scene that made Elena's breath catch. Community members had gathered spontaneously, working alongside the construction crew to plant trees along the future garden path. Children ran between the saplings, their laughter carrying up to the office. "They're doing this on their own time," the woman explained. "They say they want their kids to see the trees grow with the community." Marcus pressed his face against the glass. "Mom, look! They're using the planting design we created in the environmental workshop." Elena felt the baby kick, as if responding to the excitement in Marcus's voice. Victoria noticed her hand move to her belly and stepped closer. "Everything okay?" "Perfect." Elena smiled. "Just perfect." As they watched the impromptu community gathering below, Elena realized something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't just a construction site or a business project anymore. It was becoming exactly what they'd hoped for. A place where community, family, and purpose intertwined in unexpected but beautiful ways. Alexander's phone buzzed with a message about the next day's board meeting, but for once he didn't immediately check it. Some moments were too important to interrupt. "Dad," Marcus called, "can we go down and help plant trees too?" Alexander looked at Eleanor, who nodded encouragingly. "Why not? It's your community too." As they made their way downstairs, Eleanor held back with Victoria. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything." Victoria linked her arm through Elena's. "That's what family does, remember, even if we're making up the rules as we go along." The Sterling Enterprises boardroom crackled with tension as Alexander faced the anxious board members. Market projections displayed on the screen showed concerning trends, and Richard Blackwood was in full crisis mode. "We need to scale back," Richard insisted, pointing to the figures. "The market can't support this level of investment in experimental community projects. We should focus on our core business." Alexander remained calm, though his jaw tightened. "This isn't experimental. It's the future of sustainable development, and we're leading the way." "The numbers don't lie, Alexander," another board member argued. "We're looking at a significant market downturn. The responsible choice would be to protect our primary investments." "Show them," Victoria said from her seat beside Alexander. He nodded, switching to a new presentation. "These are the advance contracts we've secured for our first graduating class of certified technicians. Tesla, Google, Amazon. They're not just hiring our graduates, they're investing in the training program itself." The board members leaned forward, interest peaked. "And this," he continued, switching slides again, "is the waiting list for our sustainable housing units. We're not just building homes, we're creating a model that other cities are already looking to replicate. Which means," Victoria added, "we'll be positioned to consult on similar projects nationwide. The potential revenue stream extends far beyond the initial development." "But the immediate costs," Richard began. The boardroom door opened and Elena entered, followed by James. Despite being officially on maternity leave, she had insisted on attending this crucial meeting. "The immediate costs are an investment in our future," she stated, making her way to the front. And not just the company's future. James distributed tablets to the board members as Elena continued. You're looking at testimonials from our community partners, letters of intent from major tech firms, and preliminary inquiries from 3 other cities interested in implementing our model. She paused, letting the board members scroll through the documentation. But more importantly, you're looking at proof that doing the right thing can also be the profitable thing. Mrs. Martinez, one of the older board members, spoke up. These community engagement statistics are remarkable. Because we're not just building buildings, Elena explained. We're building relationships, trust, and opportunities. That's something no market downturn can devalue. Victoria stood, moving to join Elena. The Sterling Environmental Training Institute isn't just a school. It's an incubator for the next generation of environmental technology experts. Our graduates will be pioneering new solutions, creating new markets. And our company will be at the forefront of those markets, Alexander concluded. This isn't about weathering the current storm. It's about emerging from it stronger, with a clear path to the future. The boardroom fell silent as members studied the data. Finally, Richard spoke, his tone reluctantly impressed. You've thought this through more thoroughly than I expected. We had help, Elena smiled, thinking of Marcus's innovative contributions to the community center design. Sometimes the best solutions come from unexpected sources. After the meeting, as the board members filed out with cautious approval for the project's continuation, Elena sank into a chair, exhausted. You didn't have to come, Alexander said softly. Victoria and I could have handled it. I know, Elena replied, but this project, it's more than just business now. It's about the world we're creating for our children. Victoria brought Elena a glass of water. Speaking of children, how's our newest architect doing? Elena laughed, resting a hand on her belly. Very active. I think all this excitement got to them. Marcus will be thrilled you made it to the meeting, Victoria said. He was worried you'd miss his presentation at the community center opening next week. I wouldn't miss it for anything, Elena assured her. Though you might need to save me a comfortable chair. James appeared in the doorway. Sorry to interrupt, but the community center contractor needs a decision on the solar panel configuration. Marcus's design has some unique requirements. Alexander grinned. Let me guess, he's still insisting on the playground power generation system? Actually, James looked amused. His calculations for energy output are impressively accurate. The contractors want to know if they can use his design as a model for other projects. Pride shone on all 3 parents' faces. Their son, their unusual family, their shared vision. It was all coming together in ways none of them could have predicted. We should celebrate, Victoria suggested. The board's approval, the community center progress, Elena's last public appearance before maternity leave, and Marcus's first patent application, Alexander added. The lawyers think his playground design is genuinely innovative. Elena felt tears threatening. These pregnancy hormones were relentless. I'd like that, but maybe something quiet, just family. Of course, Victoria smiled. I'll make those blueberry pancakes Marcus loves. We can eat on the terrace, watch the sunset over the city we're helping to transform. As they gathered their things to leave, Elena paused, looking out over the city skyline. Somewhere out there, communities were growing, lives were changing, and a new generation was learning to dream bigger dreams. Ready to go? Alexander asked, holding the door. Elena nodded, thinking of the family dinner ahead, of Marcus explaining his latest designs, of the baby kicking as if eager to join the conversation. Yes, she said, I'm ready. The community center auditorium buzzed with excitement as residents gathered for the official opening ceremony. Marcus stood backstage, nervously adjusting his tie, a miniature version of Alexander's, while Victoria helped him organize his presentation cards. Remember, she said, straightening his collar, just like we practiced. Take deep breaths, speak clearly, and remember that everyone out there already loves your ideas. But what if I forget something important? Marcus whispered, his hands fidgeting with the cards. Then you'll handle it gracefully, Elena's voice came from behind them. She was sitting in a comfortable chair, looking radiant despite being days away from her due date. Just like you handled that question about solar panel efficiency at the board meeting. Marcus brightened at the memory. Dad said I explained it better than the contractors did. That's because you understand not just how it works, but why. For it matters, Alexander added, joining them backstage. Ready, son? The word son still brought a smile to Marcus's face every time he heard it. He nodded, squaring his shoulders with newfound confidence. The ceremony began with community leaders speaking about the impact of the project. Elena watched from backstage as elderly residents described how the training programs had given their grandchildren new opportunities, as young mothers expressed gratitude for the affordable housing initiatives, as local business owners shared their excitement about the sustainable technology partnerships. Then it was Marcus's turn. He walked to the podium, looking tiny behind it but somehow filling the space with his presence. Victoria squeezed Elena's hand as they watched, while Alexander stood tall, barely containing his pride. When I first started designing the playground power generation system, Marcus began, his voice clear and steady, some people thought it was just a kid's dream. But my mom always taught me that dreams are how big things start. He clicked to his first slide, showing his original sketches next to the actual completed structures. And then Victoria taught me how to turn dreams into plans. She showed me that every big idea needs careful thinking and hard work to become real. Alexander's eyes grew misty as Marcus continued, My dad taught me that business isn't just about making money. It's about making things better. He showed me that when you believe in something, you have to stand up for it, even when it's hard. In the audience, James wiped away a tear, remembering the scared little boy he'd first met months ago, now transformed into this confident young presenter. This community center isn't just a building, Marcus explained, showing slides of the innovative features. It's a place where we can all learn and grow together. The playground doesn't just make clean energy. It shows kids like me that we can make a difference. The greenhouse doesn't just grow food, it grows hope. And the classrooms don't just teach skills, they teach us that we're all connected. He turned to his final slide, revealing a drawing he'd made of the entire community, the training institute, the housing complex, the community center, all connected by green spaces and walking paths. But what caught everyone's eye were the people he'd drawn, all shapes, sizes, and colors, working and playing together. My family isn't like other families, Marcus said, his voice growing softer but no less confident. I have a mum who never gives up, a dad who learned to listen, and Victoria, who showed me that love doesn't have to follow rules. Soon I'll have a baby sister or brother too. And you know what? That's okay. Because different can be beautiful. Elena felt the baby kick strongly as if in agreement. Victoria quietly handed her a tissue. This center is like my family, Marcus concluded. It might not look like what people expect, but it works because we all care about each other and work together. That's what community means, that's what family means. The applause was thunderous. Marcus beamed as community members rose to their feet, many wiping away tears. Alexander moved to the podium to stand beside his son, placing a proud hand on his shoulder. Ladies and gentlemen, Alexander began, but was interrupted by a gasp from backstage. Elena had grabbed Victoria's arm, her face a mixture of surprise and acceptance. I think, she said calmly, the baby wants to make an appearance at the opening ceremony too. Victoria's eyes widened. Now? Now. The next few moments were a blur of activity. James already had the car running out front. Alexander quickly concluded the ceremony while Victoria helped Elena up. Marcus, still at the podium, made an impromptu announcement. Everyone? The community center is officially open, but we have to go now because my baby brother or sister is coming. The audience erupted in cheers and well-wishes as the unusual family made their way to the exit. Marcus held Elena's other hand, practically bouncing with excitement. Remember your breathing exercises, Victoria coached as they walked, just like we practiced. You've been practicing with her? Alexander asked, surprised. Victoria smiled. Every Tuesday during our design meetings. Elena's been teaching me about sustainable community development, and I've been learning about Lamar's. Elena managed a laugh despite the contraction building. Never thought I'd have a birthing coach who's also my ex-husband's wife. Never thought I'd be one, Victoria replied, but here we are. As they helped Eleanor into the car, Marcus tugged on Alexander's sleeve. Dad, is everything going to change? Again? Alexander knelt down to his son's level. Some things will change, yes, but the important things, how much we all love you, how we're all family, that will stay the same. Just like your community center, we're building something special. Here. Marcus nodded, then hurried to climb into the car next to Eleanor. Don't worry, Mom, we're all here for you. Eleanor smiled through another contraction, looking at the faces around her. Marcus's excitement, Alexander's concern, Victoria's steady support, James's reliable presence in the driver's seat, her unusual, beautiful family about to grow even larger. Yes, she breathed. We are all here. That's what matters. The hospital waiting room had become familiar territory for this unconventional family. Alexander paced, just as he had months ago during Elena's pregnancy scare. This time, however, Victoria was in the delivery room with Elena, while Marcus sat with James, working on a special surprise. Do you think the baby will like it? Marcus asked, adding final touches to his drawing. James peered at the artwork, a detailed sketch of their entire family, standing in front of the community center, with a special spot reserved for the new addition. It's perfect, though you might want to wait to fill in the hair color until we know if it's a boy or girl. It doesn't matter, Marcus said confidently. They're family either way. Alexander paused his pacing to look at his son's drawing. The way Marcus had portrayed them, Elena and Victoria standing together, himself next to them, James nearby, and now a space for the baby, showed how completely the boy had accepted their unusual arrangement. Dad? Marcus's voice was thoughtful. Remember, when you first told me you were my father and I was angry, Alexander sat down beside him. I remember. I was scared, Marcus admitted. I thought everything would change. And it did change, but... He looked up at his father. It changed in a good way. Do you think it'll be good this time too? Before Alexander could answer, Victoria emerged from the delivery room, her face glowing. Would you like to meet your sister? Marcus jumped up. It's a girl? A beautiful, healthy baby girl, Victoria confirmed. Your mom did amazing and they're both ready to see you. Alexander helped Marcus straighten his shirt before they entered the room. Eleanor lay in the hospital bed, tired but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a pink blanket. She smiled as Marcus approached cautiously. Come meet your sister. Sweetheart, she said softly. Isabella Maria Martinez. Marcus peered at the baby's face. She's so small, he whispered. Hi, Isabella. I'm your big brother. I made you a picture, but your hair isn't colored in yet because we didn't know you were a girl. The baby made a tiny sound, and Marcus's face lit up. She talked to me. She knows her big brother's voice, Victoria said, standing next to Alexander. She heard you reading all those environmental science books to Eleanor's belly. Eleanor watched as Marcus carefully showed Isabella his drawing, explaining each person in it with great detail. She caught Victoria's eye and mouthed, "Thank you," for being there during the delivery, for supporting them all through this journey. She has your eyes, Alexander said softly to Elena. And your mother's nose, Elena replied. I remember the photos you showed me. A nurse entered with forms to fill out. Father's name? She asked professionally. Carlos Ramirez, Elena answered. The nurse nodded, but before she could continue, Marcus spoke up. But she has 3 other parents too, he declared, just like I have 3. The nurse looked confused, but Eleanor smiled. He's right, maybe not on the official forms, but in all the ways that matter. Victoria moved to sit on the edge of the bed. Speaking of forms, the contractor approved Marcus's modified designs for the community center playground. They want to start installation next week. Really? Marcus's eyes lit up. Can Isabella come see it when it's done? Of course, Alexander assured him. She'll grow up watching all your ideas become reality. James appeared in the doorway with a tablet. Sorry to interrupt, but you might want to see this. He turned the tablet to show them a local news website. The headline read, Sterling Enterprises Young Innovator welcomes sister during Community Center opening. Below was a photo of Marcus at the podium, alongside a community member's snapshot of their hasty exit. The comments are amazing, James said. The community is celebrating with us. They're calling it a perfect example of how the project brings people together. Elena laughed softly. Trust your daughter to make a grand entrance, Alexander. My granddaughter has perfect timing, a new voice said. They turned to see Richard Blackwood in the doorway, looking somewhat out of place in his business suit, but holding a large teddy bear. The board saw the news. They've approved the expansion of the training program to 2 other cities. Marcus tugged on Victoria's sleeve. Does this mean we get to design more community centers? It means, Victoria smiled, that your sister is going to grow up watching her big brother change the world, one sustainable playground at a time. Isabella chose that moment to let out a tiny yawn, causing everyone to laugh softly. Elena adjusted the baby in her arms, making space for Marcus to sit beside her. Look, Isabella, Marcus whispered. That's Victoria. She's really good at designing buildings and making pancakes. And that's Dad. He helps make big dreams come true. And James is like our uncle, he takes care of everyone. And Mum, he paused, looking at Eleanor with pure love. Mum shows us that family can be whatever we make it. Eleanor felt tears sliding down her cheeks as she watched her son introduce his sister to their beautiful, unconventional family. Victoria discreetly handed her a tissue, while Alexander placed a gentle hand on Marcus's shoulder. In that moment, surrounded by the family they had built through choice rather than convention, Elena knew that everything had worked out exactly as it should. Not because it was traditional or expected, but because it was real, honest, and full of love. Isabella blinked up at them all, seeming to take in each face with newborn wisdom. Marcus carefully reached out to hold her tiny hand. Welcome to the family, little sister, he said softly. It's a little different, but that's what makes it special. 3 months after Isabella's birth, the Sterling Environmental Training Institute was bustling with its first graduation ceremony. The auditorium was packed with proud families watching their loved ones receive certifications in sustainable technology. Elena sat in the front row holding a sleeping Isabella, while Marcus fidgeted excitedly beside her, wearing a junior instructor badge, a special recognition for his contributions to the playground energy system curriculum. Victoria stood at the podium presenting the certificates. Each graduate here today represents not just personal achievement, but a commitment to building a better future for our community, she announced. You are the pioneers of a new approach to sustainable development. Alexander, seated on Marcus's other side, watched with pride as the graduates crossed the stage. Many of them were local residents who had once been skeptical of the project. Now they were skilled professionals, ready to implement sustainable solutions in their own community and beyond. And now, Victoria continued, I'd like to invite our special junior instructor to present our final award, the Innovation in Sustainable Design Scholarship. Marcus straightened his tie and walked confidently to the podium. Victoria adjusted the microphone for his height as he pulled out his notes. The Innovation in Sustainable Design Scholarship goes to someone who thinks differently, Marcus began, his voice clear and strong. Someone who sees problems as opportunities to make things better, kind of like how my family saw challenges as chances to build something special. He paused, looking at the audience. Maria Rodriguez started in our program as a maintenance worker, but she saw how the solar panels could be adjusted to work better in different weather. She created a new tracking system that makes them 20% more efficient, and she did it while raising 3 kids on her own. In the audience, Maria's children beamed with pride as their mother stood to accept the award. Marcus handed her the certificate and scholarship letter, with a professional handshake just as he'd practiced with Alexander. "Congratulations, Mrs. Rodriguez," Marcus said into the microphone. "Your ideas will help make clean energy available to more families, like yours." The applause was thunderous. Isabella stirred in Elena's arms, blinking at the noise before settling back to sleep. Eleanor looked down at her daughter, marveling at how much had changed in 3 months. The graduation reception moved to the community center's main hall, where the playground power generation system was now fully operational. Children played on the equipment, while their parents admired the energy output displays Marcus had insisted on installing, simple, colorful gauges that showed how much power the playground was producing. "Your son is quite the engineer," Richard Blackwood commented to Alexander, watching Marcus explain the system to a group of interested graduates. "The board is impressed with how his designs are performing." "He gets his innovation from Elena," Alexander replied proudly, "and his attention to detail from Victoria." "And his business sense from you," Elena added, joining them with Isabella, "though hopefully with a better work-life balance." Richard chuckled, making faces at the baby. "The market analysts were wrong about this project. Community engagement is at record levels. Our sustainable technology patents are attracting major investors, and the waiting list for the training program keeps growing. Because we're not just building buildings or training technicians," Victoria said, approaching with a stack of new project proposals. "We're building connections. Speaking of which," she handed Alexander one particular folder. "The mayor of Boston called. They want to implement our model in their city." Elena adjusted Isabella in her arms. "That's the 3rd city this month. We'll need to expand our team." "Already working on it," Victoria smiled. "I've been talking to Maria about joining the training staff. Her solar panel modifications could be implemented across all our projects." Marcus ran up to them, excitement written across his face. "Mom, Dad, Mrs. Rodriguez wants to know if I can help teach the solar panel class next semester." "What about your own studies?" Elena asked, though she already knew her son was far ahead of his grade level in science and math. "I can do both," Marcus insisted. "Victoria helped me make a schedule and—" He hesitated, looking at Alexander and Victoria. "I was thinking maybe I could stay at your place during teaching days. It's closer to the institute." The adults exchanged glances, touched by how naturally Marcus navigated between his 2 homes. There was no tension, no awkwardness, just a boy who felt secure in his unusual family's love. "Of course you can," Victoria said warmly. "We can review lesson plans over breakfast." "And I'll help you prepare your presentations," Alexander added. Elena smiled, remembering how far they'd come from the days when such arrangements would have felt painful or complicated. Now they were just part of their family's rhythm. Isabella chose that moment to reach out toward Marcus, who immediately moved to hold his sister's tiny hand. "Look, Isabella, the playground is making enough power to run all the lights in the community center. One day I'll teach you how it works too." A community member approached with questions about the training program, and Elena handed Isabella to Victoria without hesitation. The baby settled contentedly in Victoria's arms, while Elena explained the application process. Alexander watched his extended family, Elena passionate about her work, Victoria cradling Isabella with natural ease, Marcus enthusiastically sharing his knowledge, and all the lives they were touching through their project. It wasn't the life he'd imagined for himself, but it was better than anything he could have planned. "Dad," Marcus tugged at his sleeve, "can we show Mrs. Rodriguez the new designs for the Boston project? I have some ideas for improving the wind turbine integration." "Lead the way, son," Alexander smiled. "Lead the way." The Stellar Heights Hotel's grand ballroom looked vastly different from the night when Elena had served coffee there just over a year ago. Tonight, it hosted the first annual Sterling Sustainable Communities Conference, bringing together developers, community leaders, and environmental experts from across the country. Elena stood at the podium, no longer in a server's uniform, but in an elegant suit, her confidence radiating through the room. "Sustainable development isn't just about buildings or technology," she addressed the packed audience. "It's about creating spaces where communities can thrive, where innovation meets everyday needs, and where different perspectives come together to create something extraordinary. In the front row, Isabella slept peacefully in Victoria's arms, while Marcus sat between her and Alexander, taking detailed notes. At 8 months old, Isabella was already a regular presence at corporate events, her sunny personality winning hearts, just as her brother's brilliant mind won admirers. Our success in the East Side project wasn't just about the technology or the training programs, Elena continued. It was about trust, about showing that when we invest in people, when we truly listen to communities, everyone benefits. She clicked to the next slide, showing the project's impressive statistics. Employment rates up 40%, energy costs down 60%, and a waiting list for both housing and training programs that stretched into the next year. But perhaps our most important achievement isn't measured in numbers, Elena smiled, glancing at her family in the front row. It's measured in the relationships we've built, the barriers we've broken, and the future we're creating together. As Eleanor concluded her speech to enthusiastic applause, Victoria handed Isabella to Alexander and joined Elena on stage for the next presentation. The two women had become an impressive team, their different perspectives and skills complementing each other perfectly. Our next phase of development, Victoria announced, pulling up new architectural renderings, includes expanding the training institute to accommodate growing demand. And I'm pleased to introduce our junior design consultant, who has some innovative ideas to share. Marcus walked confidently to the podium, now familiar with public speaking. At 7 years old, he'd already been featured in several engineering magazines for his playground power generation system, which was being implemented in parks across the country. Traditional buildings separate people, Marcus began, showing his designs. But our new institute brings them together. The classrooms transform into community spaces, the cafeteria doubles as a farmer's market, and the playground. He grinned. Well, that's still my favorite part. Laughter rippled through the audience. Marcus continued, explaining how his latest design improvements would increase energy efficiency, while making the equipment even more fun for children to use. From his seat, Alexander bounced Isabella gently as she stirred, overwhelmed with pride, as he watched his family in action. His son's brilliant mind, Elena's passionate commitment to community, Victoria's elegant design solutions, they had created something remarkable together. James appeared beside him, holding up his phone. The Boston mayor's office called. They want to fast-track their project, and Chicago just reached out about implementing the program there. Isabella reached for James, who took her with practiced ease. The baby had as many honorary uncles and aunts as she had sustainable playgrounds to explore. After the presentations, during the reception, Eleanor found a quiet moment with Victoria. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked, watching Marcus demonstrate his latest design concepts to an impressed group of developers, while Alexander proudly looked on. "Not in my wildest dreams," Victoria admitted. "But that's the beauty of it, isn't it? Sometimes the best things in life come from being open to unexpected possibilities." They watched as Isabella, now awake and in James's arms, reached out toward Marcus. The boy immediately went to his sister, his face lighting up as she grabbed his finger. "See those solar panels, Isabella," they heard him explain. "They're like our family. They work together to make everything brighter." Elena felt tears threatening. "He's getting quite philosophical." "He gets that from you," Victoria smiled, "along with his determination to make the world better." Alexander joined them, wrapping an arm around Victoria while smiling warmly at Elena. "The mayor wants us to consult on their city-wide sustainability initiative," he said. "All of us." "All of us?" Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "He specifically requested our unique team approach," Alexander explained. "Apparently, our family structure has become as much a talking point as our sustainable technology." "Speaking of family," Victoria nodded toward Marcus, who was now showing Isabella a miniature model of his latest playground design. "I think our junior engineer has some new ideas he's dying to share." Marcus looked up, catching their attention. "Mom, Victoria, Dad, I figured out how to make the swings generate even more power, and Isabella helped." "She helped?" Eleanor asked, amused. Well, she smiled when I got the calculations right, Marcus explained seriously. She's very encouraging. As they gathered around to hear Marcus's latest innovation, Eleanor looked at their unconventional family, her brilliant sons, her ex-husband and his wife who had become essential parts of her life, her baby daughter who was loved by them all, and the extended family they'd built through their work. A year ago, she'd been serving coffee in this very ballroom, hiding her pregnancy and her past. Now she was helping lead a revolution in sustainable community development, supported by a family that defied convention, but overflowed with love. You know what, Marcus? She said, pulling her son close. Isabella's not the only encouraging one. We all help each other shine brighter. Marcus beamed, looking around at his family. Just like my power generation system, everything working together to create something amazing. Exactly, Victoria agreed, taking Isabella from James. And speaking of amazing things, I believe someone has a birthday coming up next week. Marcus's eyes lit up. Can we have it at the community center? I want to show everyone the new solar installation. Only you would want a birthday party at a sustainable technology demonstration, Alexander laughed. Actually, Elena smiled. I can think of 4 people who would love exactly that kind of celebration. They all laughed, knowing she was right. Their family might be different, but that difference had become their strength, their inspiration, and their greatest success story yet. The Chicago winter wind whipped around the construction site of the newest Sterling Environmental Training Institute as Marcus, now 8 years old, led a group of local officials through his latest innovation. Despite the cold, his enthusiasm warmed the atmosphere as he explained the underground heating system he'd designed. The playground equipment doesn't just generate electricity, he explained, pointing to his detailed diagrams. It also captures kinetic energy that helps heat the building in winter. The more kids play, the warmer the classrooms get. Elena watched from the site office window, holding a sleeping Isabella close to keep her warm. The toddler, now 15 months old, was bundled up against the Chicago chill, her dark curls peeking out from under her tiny, sustainable wool hat, a gift from one of their East Side project graduates who'd started an eco-friendly clothing business. He's really something special, Chicago's mayor said, joining Elena at the window. When Boston recommended your family team, they mentioned your son's brilliance, but this exceeds all expectations. He surprises us every day, Elena agreed, adjusting Isabella as she stirred. Though lately his little sister has been giving him competition in the innovation department. As if on cue, Isabella pointed to the solar panels being installed on the roof and said clearly, "Sun power," one of her first compound words, much to Marcus's delight. Victoria entered the office shaking snow from her coat. The contractors love the new heating system design, she reported. They're already talking about implementing it in other buildings across the city. And the community engagement? Elena asked, knowing this had been their biggest challenge in Chicago. Better than expected, Victoria smiled. Having Marcus explain the technology helps. It's hard to be skeptical when an 8-year-old makes sustainable energy sound like the most exciting thing in the world. Through the window, they could see Alexander joining Marcus at the presentation. Father and son made an impressive team, Alexander handling the business aspects while Marcus explained the technical innovations with infectious enthusiasm. Your family's approach is unique, the mayor observed. The way you all work together, despite, or perhaps because of your unusual circumstances. Elena and Victoria exchanged knowing looks. They'd grown accustomed to people's curiosity about their family dynamic. We learned that different doesn't mean wrong, Victoria said diplomatically. It just means finding new ways to make things work. Outside, Marcus was now demonstrating how the playground slide would generate extra power through static electricity, a recent innovation he'd developed after a static-filled hug with Isabella had sparked his imagination. "Mum, Victoria," he called through the window, "can you bring Isabella? I want to show everyone how she inspired the static electricity system." Elena laughed. "Should we brave the cold?" For Marcus's static electricity demonstration, always, Victoria grinned. helping bundle Isabella up more securely. As they joined the group outside, Isabella clapped her mittened hands at the sight of her brother. "Marcus, play!" she called out, her growing vocabulary a source of constant joy for her family. Marcus took a break from his presentation to hug his sister. "Want to help me show everyone how we make power from playing?" Isabella nodded enthusiastically, and the officials watched in amazement as Marcus turned a simple game of peekaboo into a lesson about static electricity generation. "The children's eye. Natural energy becomes sustainable power," he explained, his voice serious despite his playful interaction with Isabella. "Just like how our family's different energies work together to make something special." One of the city council members wiped away a tear. "My daughter's on the autism spectrum," she shared quietly. "Everyone said she couldn't succeed in traditional schools. But seeing this, seeing how you've made sustainable technology so accessible, so engaging. We're planning specialized programs for children with different learning styles," Eleanor assured her. "Marcus has been particularly insistent about making our training programs adaptable to various needs. Thus, because everyone thinks differently," Marcus added, overhearing them while helping Isabella examine a solar panel display. "And different thoughts lead to new ideas." Alexander wrapped an arm around Victoria as they watched Marcus continue his presentation, now incorporating Isabella's enthusiastic participation into his demonstration. "Remember when we worried about how this would all work out?" he murmured. Victoria leaned into him. "Now we know it worked out exactly as it should." Later that evening, in their temporary Chicago apartment, the family gathered for their traditional project dinner. These meals had become a cherished ritual during their expansion work, a time to share ideas, solve problems, and simply enjoy being together. Isabella sat in her high chair, carefully arranging her food into patterns that Marcus insisted looked like solar panel configurations. "She's definitely going to be an engineer too," he declared proudly. "She might surprise us all and become a ballet dancer," Elena teased. "She can be both," Victoria suggested. "The world needs all kinds of innovators." Alexander watched his family with contentment. The Chicago project was their most ambitious yet, but seeing them all work together, Marcus's brilliant mind, Elena's community insight, Victoria's design expertise, even Isabella's growing curiosity, he knew they could handle any challenge. "Dad?" Marcus's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "I have a new idea for the Boston expansion. What if we connected all our institutes with a virtual energy sharing network, like how our family stays connected even when we're in different cities?" Elena and Victoria both looked up, intrigued. Even Isabella seemed to sense the excitement, clapping her hands and saying, "New power." "Tell us more, son," Alexander encouraged, reaching for his tablet to take notes. How would this network work? As Marcus launched into his explanation, complete with impromptu diagrams drawn on napkins, Elena caught Victoria's eye across the table. They shared a smile, both thinking the same thing. Their unconventional family hadn't just adapted to change, they'd become catalysts for it, creating ripples of transformation that reached far beyond their own lives. The United Nations conference room buzzed with anticipation as representatives from around the world gathered to learn about the Sterling Sustainable Communities Initiative. On the stage, Marcus stood confidently beside his family, now a poised 9-year-old whose reputation in sustainable innovation preceded him. "Our approach isn't just about technology," he began, his voice clear and passionate. "It's about connecting people. Like how my sister Isabella taught me that sometimes the best ideas come from unexpected moments." In the front row, Isabella, now 2 years old, sat between Eleanor and Victoria, helping them with their presentation notes by adding her own colorful drawings to the margins. Her presence at such events had become as natural as Marcus's technical explanations. "When we started this journey," Elena continued, taking the podium, "we thought we were just building sustainable communities, but we've created something more. A model of how different perspectives, different families, different approaches can come together to create positive change." Victoria stepped forward to present the technical aspects, showing how their family's unique dynamic had influenced their design philosophy. "Our buildings don't just house people, they bring them together. Our training programs don't just teach skills, they build bridges between communities. Alexander, watching from the side of the stage, felt a familiar surge of pride. The past year had seen their initiative expand to 15 cities across 3 countries, each project strengthened by the lessons they'd learned about family, community, and unconventional wisdom. During the question and answer session, a delegate from India raised her hand. Your family structure is unusual by many standards. How has this influenced your approach to community development? Before any of the adults could respond, Marcus stepped to the microphone. My family taught me that different doesn't mean wrong, he said thoughtfully. It means having more ways to solve problems, like how my mom and Victoria work together, even though most people think ex-wives and new wives shouldn't be friends. Or how my dad learned that being successful isn't just about making money, it's about making life better for others. Isabella chose that moment to toddle onto the stage, making a beeline for her brother. Without missing a beat, Marcus lifted her up. And my sister shows us that love doesn't care about conventional families. She has 3 parents and 1 big brother, who all work together to make the world better for her future. The audience broke into spontaneous applause, moved by the simple wisdom of a child who had grown up knowing that family was about love and support, not conformity to traditional models. Later that evening, at a quiet celebration in their hotel suite, James arrived with news from the East Side Project. The first graduating class from our specialized program for children with different learning needs just completed their certifications. 100% employment rate already. Marcus looked up from where he was showing Isabella how to build a miniature wind turbine from her blocks. Really? Even Tommy? He was worried about the final exams. Especially Tommy, James grinned. The solar panel company was impressed by his unique approach to installation design. They're implementing his method across all their projects. Elena felt tears of pride forming. The specialized program had been Marcus's idea, inspired by his friendship with Tommy, a student with dyslexia who saw patterns in solar panel arrangements that others missed. We're creating something remarkable, Victoria mused, watching Isabella carefully place another block according to Marcus's instructions. Not just sustainable buildings or green technology, but a new way of seeing possibility and differences. Alexander nodded, remembering how far they'd come from the days when he thought success was measured solely in profit margins. The UN representatives were impressed. They're talking about implementing our model in developing nations, with adaptations for local needs, Elena added quickly, her community development expertise showing. Each culture, each community has its own unique strengths to bring to the project. Like our family, Marcus said, helping Isabella complete her block turbine. Everyone brings something different, and that makes it better. Isabella looked up at her family, her young face serious as she declared, all help, all love. The 5 adults laughed at her perfect summation of their philosophy. Even at 2, she seemed to grasp the essential truth of their unusual family dynamic. Speaking of help and love, Victoria said, pulling out her tablet, wait until you see the latest community center designs. Marcus and I have been working on something special. As they gathered around to look at the plans, Elena observed her family with quiet joy. Marcus explaining technical details to an attentive Isabella, Victoria, and Alexander, offering suggestions for improvements, James taking notes for implementation. They had created something extraordinary together. Mom, Marcus called her, attention back to the present. Remember when you used to serve coffee at the hotel, and now you're helping change the world instead? Elena smiled, remembering that night that seemed so long ago. Sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest moments. Like family, Isabella added unexpectedly, making them all turn to look at her. Yes, sweetheart, Victoria agreed, lifting her onto her lap. Exactly like family. As the evening wound down, they found themselves on the hotel balcony, looking out over the city lights. Marcus was explaining to Isabella how they could make all those lights work with solar power, while the adults shared quiet observations about the day's events. We're not just building sustainable communities anymore, Elena reflected. showing the world that there are many ways to create something beautiful. Through technology, Marcus added. Through innovation, Victoria continued. Through understanding, Alexander contributed. Through love, Isabella concluded simply, earning surprised looks from everyone. And in that moment, under the stars, their unconventional family stood together, united in their mission to show the world that the most sustainable foundation for any community was acceptance, innovation, and love, in all its unique and wonderful forms.